joining us. Former senior FBI official and MS Now national security and intelligence analyst once again, Chris O'Leary. Former assistant chief counsel for ICE, Veronica Cardenas, joins us again, and former inspector general of the Department of the Interior, Mark Greenblatt. Mark, I'll begin with you. There's been a shattering of trust and confidence in this agency. And this agency is necessary. It does do important work. It was founded for a reason. How do you restore that trust in an agency that has behaved like this?
Well, I think one critical step would be introducing, for Congress to introduce a bipartisan, apolitical commission to review the two shootings of Rebecca Good and Mr. Preddy as well. That is absolutely essential. We saw it with the 9/11 Commission. We've seen it in other circumstances where you've had these festering sores in our communities. And I think that's an important step that would at least do a transparent review so that everyone can see what the evidence is and have confidence that the commission is apolitical in coming to findings based on that evidence.
Well, that's a start. But there's a lot more here, Chris O'Leary. There's the tactics on the street. There's recruitment. There's the training. There's the messaging from the top, the sentiment of what they need to do and what they're out there to do. Explain if you have any concerns with that.
Yeah, so I think the president highlighting these two most recent tragic events as being isolated incidents is just not accurate and it's not truthful. The fact of the matter is, since this administration came into office, you've seen a radical departure from what ICE traditionally was, which carries out a very important mission, but they do it usually in traditional law enforcement methods. I've never seen an ICE officer, by the way, in the past put on a tactical plate carrier, the type of thing I used to wear in Iraq and Afghanistan. Really shouldn't be seeing that unless it's a SWAT operation on U.S. streets, and that is very narrowly scoped. They're running around in camouflage, which, by the way, doesn't really blend in urban environments, and masks. This is not law enforcement. And if you ask any police officer around the country, they don't identify this as law enforcement, protecting and serving, delivering justice to the community. This is a culture of violence, and they've been empowered to do so, and I think deliberately so, because it's going to invite civil unrest, which my concern is this administration wants. They want some upheaval so they can, deploy more troops, use more National Guard, the extremes of U.S. Marines on U.S. streets for no good reason. I don't think there's a good reason for doing this, and I don't think they're going to back away from it because they've established what this is. And frankly, it's already been talked about. There's still 2,300 occupying troops in Minneapolis, completely unneeded. The police force is roughly 700. There's plenty of other federal agencies. I was an agent in Minneapolis years ago, and the partnerships with ICE were terrific back then, and they were able to conduct their mission. And the last thing I'll say is the idea that there's a crisis here, whether it's the healthcare fraud or the invasion of immigrants, and they're all rapists and murderers and everything else, or the labeling of people as terrorists. You're creating this perception that there's some kind of crisis that justifies the deployment of force. And that frankly doesn't exist. It doesn't mean there aren't violent criminals that should be identified and removed, but it does mean that the way it's been executed is fundamentally un-American and really what we rebelled against 250 years ago.
There's this crazy stat, this crazy claim from Paul Rosenzweig in The Atlantic, and his piece is all about how to actually reform ICE. But he mentions this, and this really caught my attention. Department of Homeland Security agents already have a notably poor level of compliance with legal requirements. Indeed, one remarkable fact is that today, before the recent hiring surge comes fully online, customs officers and Border Patrol agents have committed crimes at a per capita rate that is greater than the crime rate for people who immigrated here illegally. I do want to underscore that because we do talk about that stat a lot, more broadly speaking, Veronica, that people who cross the border, other than crossing the border, generally speaking, there are obvious exceptions, don't commit crimes.
Right. And that is a valid point. When people come to this country, albeit they cross the border without any legal documents, they know that they have to pay their taxes and not commit any crimes. And those are things that they're doing because they have the hopes of legalizing their status. And so we're seeing the statistics. Most of the people that are detained now, about 80%, do not have a criminal record. And so while this administration wants to make this a novel thing, that there were all of these drug dealers, all of these people that needed to be arrested and detained, ICE was already doing that. And so this is not novel. The issue was mostly with people who are coming in at the border. But what this administration has done has moved that border enforcement from the border into the interior. And so we're seeing the escalation of violence against U.S. citizens. We're seeing First Amendment rights being violated, Fourth Amendment rights being violated by officers, agents who have been conditioned to believe that the Constitution doesn't apply to their line of work because ICE and CBP, DHS has been operating outside of the normal bounds of the Constitution because their belief was that does not apply to non-citizens.
Yeah, but they're wrapping up citizens in that as well. So how do they explain that?
Exactly. And they explain that by explaining away every other constitutional protection that we have like the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment. We saw a policy stating that ICE doesn't need a warrant to go into a person's home, which is a textbook violation of the Fourth Amendment. We saw ICE officers in New Jersey stating, "I don't know what you don't understand. We don't need a warrant. We don't need a warrant, bro," is what he said. And so this understanding of what the law means when they actually don't know what the law means, and then giving them ammunition to go enforce it and enforcing it against Americans is a very dangerous playbook.
Well, part of the issue here is that there's no accountability, and there's no internal accountability. It's not like DHS is changing its ways, but there also seems to be no third-party accountability. Judges have issued court orders, but the agency has defied those court orders. We've yet to see anybody be held in contempt of a court order, even despite that. Why is that, Mark? Why has nobody been held in contempt? Why is Kristi Noem not being hauled in front of a judge somewhere to say, hey, listen, you're not following these orders, you're the head of this agency, or Greg Bovino or somebody else?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to see that from the courts themselves. And in terms of accountability by third parties or at least independent bodies, you do have the DHS Inspector General, and that should be normally the place where there would be some measure of accountability, at least some transparency. The problem is the DHS IG now has very little credibility on the House side with the Democrats on the House side or the Democrats on the Senate side. And so that would normally be a great place for accountability and transparency inside the agency. But I don't know that even if they were to do a review in the Inspector General's office, how much weight that would have with folks on the other side. And that's the critical piece here, is where is that accountability? And so that's why I'm suggesting that they create this bipartisan commission. You can have retired judges. You could have former IGs. There are plenty of former IGs who are high-quality individuals who have done reviews of shootings like these, and that would give some credibility, some weight to that accountability mechanism, no question about it.
Yeah, and then I want to underscore one more time, and Chris, hopefully you can help me out with this. There are lots of folks who will argue that ICE is an absolutely necessary agency, that they do important work, or they had been doing important work, that the border needs to be secure, that you need to be able to find people who are not supposed to be here, potential criminals, potential terrorists even. When you have ICE operating in this way in the interior and public support plummets for their operations, for the agency itself, what does that do to its ability to secure national security? Do we need them for national security?
You certainly do. And ICE has served a great purpose and has been effective at its mission over the years. And you can't discount the fact that the border was very porous in recent years, and a lot more people came in. So not dismissing the fact that they should be doing their job and maybe get additional resources. It's the way they've executed it and their approach, their militarized approach, their excessive use of force And additionally, bringing Border Patrol, which is much more militaristic. And when you're operating on the border of ports of entry, there is a frustrated expectation of privacy. So now they're bringing that idea into urban cities and operating on the fringes of the Constitution, or completely ignoring, the First, Second, Fourth Amendment, things that were created purposely to prevent this kind of government abuse. And it's happening in front of our own eyes. And, one only has to go to, the internet, and you can find scores and scores and scores of videos of this playing out in front of you. It's not just the tragic killings in Minnesota.
Yeah. All right, everyone, thank you very much.